My name is Fred Birkbeck and I'm one of the trustees of the Kent Archaeological Society. If you're watching live, many thanks for giving up your Friday night. I promise it will be worthwhile. And if you're catching up on our YouTube channel, please remember to click the thumbs up below and also click on the subscribe button to keep yourself up to date with what we load onto the page. It's thanks to our membership subscriptions that we're able to provide these events, and we're so appreciative of their support. So if you aren't currently a member of the Society, please consider joining us by visiting our website, which is www.kentarchaeology.org.uk, and click on the join link where you can access our online membership form and read about our aims to promote the research and publication of the history and archaeology of Kent. And we're making a slight departure from our regular trustee talks, which have been held on Tuesdays. The last was with Dr. Sheila Sweetenberg on the Faversham painted pillar. And if you attended that, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you didn't attend it, all recordings of these events are available again on our YouTube channel a few days later. Tonight, we're being joined by Giles Dawkes, who's Senior Archaeologist with UCL's Archaeology South East, and he'll be taking us through his team's excavations of the Snodland Roman villa. Giles is a hugely experienced and respected archaeologist who's worked on significant projects in Kent for many years. So we're extremely grateful that he's agreed to give up his time to talk about what was found and answer questions about the villa dig in particular, or generally, how local archaeology plays such a huge part in informing the professionals. So during the course of this, feel free to submit or to comment, submit questions or comments on the content of the talk. You'll see a speech bubble on the top right hand side of your screen, and you can submit your questions and comments there. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Giles, who will take you through Snodland Roman villa.
Thank you, Fred. Good evening, I'm Giles Dawkes. Yes, tonight I'm going to be talking about Snodland Roman villa, a site that we excavated almost 15 years ago now, but it was just one of the sites that I always felt a lot of attachment to, and I've often thought about the site, so it's a pleasure to revisit it. So this is the location in the Lower Medway Valley. This is the site here. The site is actually bisected by the modern railway, and it abuts the River Medway there. This shows some of the important sites in the vicinity, particularly the Roman burial mound, which was excavated in the 1950s at Holbrook. Just off screen down here is the nearby Villa of Eccles, the much better known villa, and that's only 1 or 2 kilometres away. So this is a plan of the excavated remains, and the history of excavation at Snodland kind of represents the history of British archaeology. The first finds were identified in 1800 when a bath was discovered in a field. And then there was further antiquarian discoveries, but virtually no recording. And then in the 1920s, during the building of some modern buildings, there was some salvage of a stone sarcophagus, and a local doctor was brought in to view the body in the sarcophagus, and he said that the individual was handsome, strong and imposing, and was clearly a Frenchman, which I've always quite liked that description. And then after the 1920s, the first formal excavations began in 1964 with the Maidstone Area Archaeological Group undertaking excavations there. These continued intermittently until the 1990s when they were joined by Wessex Archaeology, who and they undertook 2 trenches here. And then finally, my team did an excavation on the other side of the railway line away from the main villa. This is the main villa here, you can see. And so we would dig in on the periphery about 80 meters away from it, but we also found masonry buildings and a lot of other features in an open area excavation which hadn't really been seen at the main excavation, like ditches, pits, the cemetery, etc. Okay, so these fantastic pictures are from the Maidstone Area Archaeological Group, and they're a very evocative sense of excavation in the 1960s and 70s. From an archaeological point of view, they show just how truncated the site was. I mean, here is you can see the building remains there, but then where this van is parked, you can see this is all gone, all been removed. So that when the kind of in the 20th century, the site was already chopped about, and a lot of the archaeology had already gone by the time archaeologists really got there. So we're just looking at fragments, and this is why Snodland is unfortunately one of the more poorer known villas in Kent, because just the state of preservation is so poor relatively. So yeah, these are some of the photographs. You can see they are beautifully excavated, particularly these bathhouses. And if you go on here, I think these are from our open day, because some of these signs say hot water tank. So I think it's clearly to show people around. And it's the ambition of myself and Mag to actually write the kind of final publication on these excavations and bring the whole work of the site together into one kind of final publication. So well, we haven't started doing that yet, but watch this space. Okay, so the Archaeology South East work in 2008 was initiated by the finding of the Snodland coin hoard. It was found by a digger, and the digger driver, it said it made a sound like breaking glass as his bucket lifted out a pot which smashed, and 3,600 copper alloy coins came out. These are here. I've never actually seen the coins, or to my knowledge, they've never been reported upon. They're still at the British Museum, but it would be great one day to get a formal kind of publication and identification of the coins. But we'll come back to this coin hoard a bit later on. So these are my excavations on the west of the site. So this is the earliest phase we found, which was the Neronian phase. And we didn't find any buildings. All we found was a ditch, which was probably part of a field system. But in the ditch was Neronian bath ceramics, ceramic building material. And particularly there was some flanged half-flue box tile, which had also been found in London and at Eccles, and it may have been made there at the kiln clamp there. And this was clearly showed that in the close vicinity there was Neronian bathhouse, almost certainly in the area of the main villa just to the east. Some of the other ceramic building material we found was this one here, T15, T16, and that's a channeled pipe, and that would have contained lead pipe work for hot water. So again, clearly indicating a bathhouse very close by in the vicinity. Some of the other CBM we found that was also from the Flavian period, so there was a successive bathhouse to this. So this is it. But here, away from the main building complex, all we had evidence for was this field system ditch, and these are some of the examples of the bathhouse ceramics here. Okay. Oh yeah, I was just going to say that there was no evidence of any this kind of mid-first century date from the main excavation. The main excavation by Mag had mainly found buildings dating to the 2nd century, so this is by far the earliest dating evidence for the villa's occupation. Also dating to the 1st century was this barrow that I mentioned earlier at Holbrook Quarry. This is excavated in the 1950s here, and it was a Roman barrow, quite unusual, capped in chalk, so it would have been very visual. It would glisten, and in it were very high status lead coffin and also lots of votive deposits. So there was burnt sheep skeletons, there was smashed amphora all at the base, and also importantly there was this folding chair. I think they're called a stela curialis. There's very few of these known from the UK, most of them from Hadrian's Wall. I think there's only like 3 or 4. And they are important because the folding chair was part of the old regalia of Roman kings, and these were generally owned by people who were very high up in administration or were military officers. So the location of this in the borough indicates there was somebody of very high status nearby, and Snodland was the nearest villa to it. It's a matter of a kilometre and a half. There's also the possibility that this individual resided at Eccles, but if that's the case, because Snodland is between the two, then perhaps Snodland was also owned by Eccles. It's tantalising glimpses at the possible ownership of these villas. Okay, so moving on, this is the on the left is the Flavian occupation, so this is the late 1st century, and then into the Antonine or 2nd century occupation. And for the first time, we get masonry remains this year. This is B1, and this is a form of Kentish building called a concentric building. I'll address more of that later. And then around this building, see, we only just clipped the edge of it, unfortunately, were a series of paddocks, field systems, ponds, yard services, wells. You can see all this here going on here. And then in the 2nd century, this was rejigged, and the layout was changed. Also, the building 1, seems to have been refurbished, and a masonry drain was installed. Now, what this drain was for, I mean, exactly what it for, we are not certain, but it seems to have drained into this ditch here. Maybe it's indicative this had a bathhouse function, but there was so little surviving of the building, we just don't know. Most of the walls had been robbed, so there was very little in situ remains, no flooring, etc., etc. So unfortunately, what the function of building 1 was, we are not entirely sure. What was recovered was a large amount of 2nd century bathhouse CBM, including curved tegular from the barrow vault of a hot room. So there was clearly a later bathhouse, probably replacing the Uronian bathhouse. Again, this was probably in location somewhere in the main villa to the east. Okay, then into the 3rd and early 4th century. This was kind of the high point of the occupation. Building 1 was demolished and replaced by another concentric building, but with a much larger footprint. And then immediately adjacent to this building was a huge pit, just full of demolition clearly from building 1, which had basically just been pushed into this massive pit. And in the pit was half a ton of CBM, 50 kilos of pottery, and usually a late Bronze Age sword pommel, and a large amount of metal tools, chisels, punches, padlocks, hammers, lots and lots of things. You can almost imagine the builders making building 2, and then as a tool breaks, they just throw it in the pit. There was also fittings from furniture, personal effects, lots of coins, brooches, and these are some of the finds we have here. These are some of the tools, hairpins, brooches, coins, decorated glass here. And then either side of building 2 here, this large masonry building with 2 timber buildings, building 3 and building 4. And then building 4 was, even though it had quite scanty relays, just post pads and post holes, it did have excellent dating evidence. Underneath one of the large stones that one of the timbers was supported on, there was a foundation deposit of a coin dating from 275 to 285. And then after the building had burnt down, the building had been cut by a pit which contained 16 coins dating to roughly 350. So we've got really good bracketing of dating evidence for the use of this building, basically between the late 3rd century and the middle of the 4th century. So this is building 2. These are the remains. Again, this photograph here is a rare element of masonry that survived. Again, most of these walls had been robbed out at a later date, and all the ragstone and chalk had been removed. So what we could tell from the building was that it had internal walls which were almost certainly wattle and daubed, and they had been painted. They'd been highly decorated with a scheme of white, pink, and red. And we were finding plaster with this on, and also in one of the rooms, room D, were 2 infant burials buried on tegulae. And generally, infants buried in this way are located close to hearths. So it is likely that this was either some type of shrine or possibly even a kitchen. It's quite a common phenomenon, that type of infant burial. And at some point the rooms were rejigged, walls taken down and put back up. Okay, so this is an interpretation of what building 2 looked like roughly in the year 300. As you can see, this is building 2 here, this is building 3 here, this is building 4 there, and then this is the ditch, the enclosure ditch. The main villa is over here to the right. So concentric buildings are a Kentish phenomenon. They're not really found elsewhere. They're pretty poorly understood, but they do seem to be like a local vernacular. So where else they've been found? So far there's 3 at Snodland, building 1, building 2, and there was 1 found by Mag to the south of the main building. Now they are difficult structures to understand, and Paul Booth has written probably the best account of describing them. And what we find is they do have a variety of uses despite being very similar in form. So for instance, at Minster and Thanet in Keston, these had clearly they were accommodation, they had hypercourse, bath suites, but at Houghton Kirkby they had lots and lots of tightly packed sleeper beams, which is the classic indication that they were a granary. At Snodland, we did actually have some evidence that they were used for crop processing. There was some burnt assemblages of macrobotanicals, which suggests that these, like Houghton Kirkby, could have been going on, and this could be a storage facility. But then we're not sure. But then again, it could have been both. It could have been part accommodation, part storage. We're just not sure. But what it does seem that these buildings had various functions, and a similarity in form does not necessarily mean a similarity in use. Okay. Okay. So the 4th century, the villa basically continued on. And the buildings seem to have lasted until about 370 when they were demolished. And then overlapping slightly at this time was a cemetery was inserted just here. And unusually, cemeteries close to villas are quite unusual. They're not as common as you think they would be. And this was enclosed, and so we found 5 individuals, all unfortunately had suffered truncation from modern services, and they all had grave goods. Here's an infant with grave goods. I don't know if you can see, but these are coffin nails. So this child was buried in a coffin with grave goods. It's quite an aberration for a child. Generally, infants don't get they don't get much elaboration of burials, and again, this was an outlier over here, buried on tegulae. And also, in this period, 2 coin hoards were buried. There was a small group of 16 coins, including iron tools, were buried, cutting building 4, and these were dated 350 to 353. And then we also had the huge coin hoard, which was actually cut through the cemetery enclosure ditch, and that also was late Roman. And also in the 1920s, there was some very tantalising finds recovered. There was a military buckle plate, which is now in the British Museum, and that's late 4th century. We didn't have any evidence really, apart from a few coins of any occupation. So, but we think mainly that the buildings were gone by 370, and these coin hoards were inserted late, and they were perhaps referencing the ruins of the building as being like a handy visual indicator for where the hoards were. Okay, and these are plans of the small cemetery, as you can see, yeah, the pottery could only broadly be dated to the 4th century, and here you can see a better indication of the coffin there. So yeah, the formal burial of children is unusual, and they think often they're in ditches or they're just put into middens. So children of this age, maybe they had some quality, like they could speak, and therefore they were considered worthy of burial formally with adults. Okay, so looking further afield, this is the Medway Valley, and it's probably one of the densest clusters of villas in the country, an incredible amount, especially when you consider just to the North Grain, where there's virtually no villas, and around Canterbury, where there's very few villas. So, and people have often wondered, why is there such concentration here? One of the reasons is it had communication links. There was the Medway, and also there was routeways running across. It's also a region that the geology is very favourable for farming. It sits on the lower greensand, and this is free draining, very fertile, and this seems to have attracted villas. Also, the Dareth Valley to the west, that was also very fertile, and there was a lot of villas there, but less so on the Stour to the east. And Ernest Black has written about this, and he's pointed out that in Kent, that the period between 260 and 310 was a period of intense disruption for villas in the southeast because of seaborne raiders like the Frankish pirates, for want of a better word. And a lot of the sites are going out of use. They're declining, they're ending, but not in the Medway. The Medway, as we can see from Snodland, continues on, and it's actually, for Snodland at least, it is kind of almost like the golden age of the occupation. But why is this? Well, we don't really know, but one possible reason is the presence of Rochester and the bridge at the top, which offered protection to the rest of the valley and was also like a handy marketplace for the goods. Other things that people have considered is specialisation with villas. And although there's not a lot of evidence from Snodland, one possible specialisation was as a type of mansio type function, as a kind of accommodation for travellers, because it was roughly halfway between Maidstone and Rochester. This would just be convenient, and the Building 1 and Building 2 would be offered accommodation. Okay, and here's the hard sell. So if you'd like more information, then check out my book. It's quite old now, it's about 8 years old now, so which is available from UCL. Okay, thanks, Fred. I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Fred.
Sorry about that. Audio turned off. Yes, it's quite a long period of occupation, that particular building. The various phases being done by different groups as well. I mean, how important is it that you, as a professional archaeologist working on commercial jobs, gets access to the material and the finds and the sort of reports of what people have done with their local groups?
Oh, very important. Yeah, they're in a way the lifeblood of archaeology, because often the local knowledge it's so in depth, and they can give you great help. And they're often the starting place where we begin, as we look at their reports and see what they've done. and I've worked with them across Kent and Sussex. Yeah, it's vital, really. So yeah. So I mean, in a way, all archaeology is kind of local archaeology. So it's especially interesting, especially with topography, the names people call in, the kind of like the local knowledge about streams, about hills. They can be very informative and very kind of, they can add colour to the kind of like the often quite dry series of pits and ditches. So
you talked about the likelihood of some of these large, opulent villas being owned by high net worth individuals, other villas. Eccles is a very famous villa. It set the standard for it in lots of ways. It's got its own, type named after it, so it's a type site. It's unfortunately, a lot of the records of it have been unwritten and unpublished. So do you find that that's a challenge when you have sites that have been investigated, perhaps the information hasn't been made available to the public?
Yeah, huge. I mean, it's a big problem for British archaeology. I mean, every period really has a publication backlogs, but villas in particular are. I mean, everyone thinks in Roman studies villas are falling out of fashion because they have been so dug and they dominate the kind of literature on Roman rural Britain. But in reality, when you look at it, so many villas have just never been published, or they've been published in fits and starts and they've never been brought together. So yeah, it's a bit of a misnomer thinking that we know too much about villas. We really don't. There's still a lot left to know, and the ambition, and myself and Mag's ambition, is to kind of, hopefully try and say something finally about Snodland, so bring it to fruition, and maybe one day Eccles, can get written up as well.
So we've got a question from Richard New, who said, you said that the villa could have been a mansio because it's halfway between Rochester and Maidstone. Now, may there have been another road that would have linked them, because the roads shown on the last map didn't include a direct road that includes Snodland. I'm just going to send that live so that everyone can see that slide that you've put up. Okay, so talk us through that slide, Giles.
So there's a prehistoric trackway going along the North Downs, and it likely forded at Snodland. So this would almost certainly have continued in use into the Roman period. So in effect, Snodland bisected Maidstone and Rochester, so it was halfway there, but it was also en route between the Dareth Valley and the Stour Valley to the east. So it was on two routes, basically a land route east-west and a water route north-south. So it was well positioned to accommodate travellers. I mean, proving what's a mansio and is very difficult. Even buildings by Roman roads, I mean, working out what is actually just a mansio and what is just a kind of a villa is very difficult. So, but this is just one of the things that has long been suspected, that these kind of large, villas just took on a variety of functions. So, because there's just not that many mansios out there, so people have to stay somewhere. So, but I mean, getting kind of tangible evidence to prove it is very difficult.
Okay, I know that there's been some research done. Simon Elliott, in particular, springs to mind with the quarrying industry, if you like, from the Ragstone quarries along the Medway, and how important that was. And obviously, you mentioned before about the transport links being so fantastic from the Medway River. Is there any sign or any indication of what the occupants or the owners of Snodland, how they made their money?
No, well, no, not really. We just don't know. I mean, it almost certainly would have been a mixed farming regime, like all villas. I mean, I think every villa that's been excavated, the excavator believe they have mixed farming regimes, because at the end of the day, a villa was a high status farm. They were at the centre of this large agricultural estate. So they would, so these buildings around the periphery, they would have been, for storage. You'd probably have corn dryers, etc., there. So they probably would have produced foods, which they would have traded to cities like Rochester and even London, and then they would have purchased and consumed high status goods from the markets in Rochester and London. And we did have some late Roman amphora, so they would clearly, they had the money to buy these kind of imported goods. So that was basically they had a two-way relationship with kind of urban centres supplying food and consuming the high status goods, really.
Okay, we've got some more questions. Actually, we've got quite a lot of questions coming through now. And so what significance do you think the sarcophagus has at the main site, Giles?
Well, the sarcophagus, if we go, I don't know if you can see the sarcophagus, we actually know the location. I think the sarcophagus has been lost. So you see here, it was the sarcophagus, our cemetery was here, but the sarcophagus, the stone coffin, was found very close to the main buildings, and so it was clearly a much more important person than the kind of wooden coffins that we had. So it was clearly somebody very important in the life of the villa, potentially a later owner. So yeah, it would have been. So it seems that Snodland had there was different cemeteries. They were separated. So maybe, for instance, the cemetery that we excavated could have been for the workers, and then the ones very close to the main villas could have been for the actual kind of like the family that live there. So there seems to be distinctions. Tantalising. We'll probably never know because it's under a housing state now.
Well, yeah, that's the problem we have, isn't it, with commercial archaeology? We sort of preserve it before it gets covered up forever. Then, those buildings may not last forever. Some stage, someone else's job will be to dig up what's underneath that. Okay, so I've got a message from an anonymous here. It says, as a teenager, I worked a bit on Mike Alcock's excavation, and I have a photo that I took, which I thought was of a pot set into a wall that contained bones of a small baby. Does that tally with anything you've found or read about in the material?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a Roman practice. They would take vessels and place babies in it. You get amphora burials. In fact, you get get a vessel, like a pottery vessel, and place it. But placed in a wall, was it?
Yeah, set into a wall. Yeah, a pot set into a wall.
That is unusual. That is very unusual. Almost like a kind of reminiscent of catacombs. But Roman burial practices are never normal. I mean, there is no such thing as normal burial practice in the Romans, so I wouldn't put it past them.
Well, you alluded to it earlier on when you were saying that they were building, burying adolescents as real people, and as often been said and is reported that you weren't a real person until you reached a certain age in the Roman world anyway. So the significance of being a body may not have been the fact that it was actually a body, the fact it was the bones of something or some sort of kind of abstract thought of a person burying in the wall.
Yeah. I mean, it could. I mean, if it was like an infant and they didn't consider it to be kind of like a formal person yet, i.e., it couldn't speak. I mean, it was too young to speak. Then, I mean, some of the practices seem callous now, but they do seem like the ones we had, like the neonates, the very young ones. They were carefully placed by presumably a hearth on a tegulae, so there was some kind of care taken to it. But alien to us now. Yeah.
Chris asks whether you've seen the concentric building at Ickham.
I haven't. No.
It's uniquely has a row of columns down the middle.
That is unusual. Yeah, kind of reminiscent of an aisled barn, like, which, yeah, that is that'd be interesting. I must check that out. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good little tip there from our local groups coming in with the goods. There's one from Anders, who's the KCC Community Archaeologist. He says that he hopes to have the Medway LiDAR online this year, so you can look at some really good topographical data that might show some better sort of ideas of relationships and networks within that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that'd be really useful for if there's any kind of open fields around Snodland. If we could see there's anything kind of like routeways might show up, like holloways might show up on the LiDAR, so we could actually work out where the ford was. So that'd be very useful.
Okay. There's one person's asking, on your map there were sites labelled 1 and 2 west of Gillingham. Can you tell us what they were?
Let's go back to it. 1 and 2. Yes. So this illustration accompanies a large table that I did, which is in the kind of publication. So that would be 1 would be Strood, and 2. What would 2 be? I think it seems that Rochester's in the wrong place. Where is that? Where is it? Maybe Cluxton? I haven't got the table in front of me actually, so I don't actually know. So they're down as villas. So 1 and 2 are villas. So they'd be villas just outside of Rochester.
Right. Okay. Then Chris is back in. His Boxley Villa sits between 28 and 19, but that's unpublished, so you may not have read.
Right, you have to appreciate I did this diagram over 10 years ago, so it is a little. I mean, the amount of work in the Medway Valley, there'd be a lot more dots now.
Yeah. I mean, we have one of our trustees, Chris Blair Myers, who you might have heard of. He does a lot on the mapping,
right,
marks and various things in Kent, and yeah, he's got a lot of dots.
Yeah. It's all about the dots.
There is another question here. Do you think that the interpretation has been affected by the assumption that Snodland was a villa?
Assumption that it was a villa.
That's leading.
Yeah, I mean, Snodland has all the classic hallmarks of being a villa. So it has, evidence of bathhouses. There's a bathing suite in the main one. It's very large. It has mosaics. So yeah, I mean, we're quite secure in our interpretation that it's a villa. So sometimes you get the much smaller kind of stone buildings, and they're kind of borderline between kind of like just a well-appointed kind of farmhouse and a villa. But I mean, labels, they're always problematic, really. So, and they would have been meaningless to the Romans probably. So
yeah, once they threw those Vitruvian principles out the window, it was all, it was open season, wasn't it? Looking at Google Maps, seems to be an imprint of a building on the opposite side of the river to the Roman villa. Kate asks, or Kate suggests. Has that been investigated? Are you aware of that?
The only thing I'm aware of, really, off the top of my head, from the other side of the mirror, was the very unusual kind of cellared building at Woodham, which was lost quarrying in the 1930s, which was fantastic. It was a subterranean barrel vaulted cellar with a stream emanating out of it, and so it had all the kind of hallmarks of being some form of cult room. So yeah, I mean, there's photographs of it from the 1930s, and it's the most amazing looking structure. Sadly now gone though, but that was very close by. So almost certainly that was involved in some part of the kind of ritual religious life of the kind of the inhabitants of the Medway.
Yeah, there is a fair amount of research available. I know that Archaeology South East are making a lot of their monographs available for free on their website, aren't they? And we at the Kent Archaeological Society, obviously, we have thousands of articles and publications and reports on archaeological digs. If you go onto the KAS website and use the search bar or go to the publications page, you can actually look up, free text searching for all these kinds of things. So it's not useful exercise in just wee small hours of the morning, just looking up various things on there. We've also got a geographical map to search on, so I'm just doing a bit of promotion there, obviously. We have another question from Anonymous. Was there any evidence of cultic or religious activity?
There was. We had kind of foundation deposits, so some of the walls had pottery vessels smashed in the base before the walls were built, and we had some wells which had perfume bottles thrown into it, almost as a kind of like final use. So once the well had kind of filled up with detritus and silting, then these seem to have been deposited on top, because they're quite an unusual thing to find in a well. So I mean, generally the Romans like to make votive deposits, and that they are very common. The trick is it's very often very difficult to identify what's just kind of normal rubbish and what is actually structurally placed special deposits. So we also had, I forgot to mention, there was a yard surface outside of building 2, and there was a copper alloy mirror underneath it. And that may have been placed as some type of kind of like foundation deposit underneath the yard surface. So all broken. They're always broken. So
yeah, the old ritual is rubbish. So
yeah, but nothing overtly kind of religious, unfortunately. So
okay, we've got a question from Gordon. The bronze hour coins were of a relatively low value. Is it usual to find such a large hoard of low value coins?
I'm not sure. I'm not great on hoards. It's a very specialist subject. The only thing I can, and the British Museum have never released any information about it, despite our request. So it's kind of unknown, really. The only information I can remember is the fact that there is virtually no copies or coins which have been clipped in it. So it seems that these coins originated from an official source and haven't been circulated. So they seem to have been quite freshly minted. And there was a possible interpretation. There was some type of kind of pay chest. So they were quite fresh, but they obviously never reach their destination. So, but again, we don't know. British Museum haven't let us know anything about them.
Well, I've got a point on that actually, which is it's fantastically showing our wonderful network, because David Holman, who you may have heard of, he's a numismatist in Kent. He's saying that the large Snodland 1 coin hoard is at Maidstone Museum, and he's actually got a list of the contents.
So that's this one then.
Sorry?
Is this Snodland one?
Yes, I think that possibly is. Yeah, he mentioned.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Okay, so yeah, I can certainly hope that I can put your details up on the YouTube channel afterwards. So when I post the video, the recording of this talk, I'll put in the comments your contact details, if I may, and people can search for the recording and get in touch with you afterwards. Put some comments on there as well. That will be monitored for a good while afterwards. We've got so many questions coming through. I'm sorry I can't get to all of them, but I'll try and pick a few more. We've got a bit of time left yet. So the late Sid Harker at Springhead excavations mentioned that baby burials were found at the corners of buildings as a token ensuring good luck for the building. So there's a little observation that might explain this. Looking for more. Okay, what are the main building materials used? question?
The main building materials were ragstone and chalk where we found them. So a lot of the building materials had been robbed out, like, so they were gone. So what we were left with is ghosts of the wall lines. So you basically find, in effect, a trench, a robber trench, and then you find those, and those mirror where the walls were. So so there were very few kind of masonry walls in situ still there in the ground. So
Wow. Okay.
I didn't say I forgot to say, in the Flavian period, the roof seems to have been yellow, a yellowy orange colour, and then it was replaced in the 2nd century with a red one. So we could identify just from the fabric types that the roof had been changed colour basically, and newer tiles had been put on it. So, but in the classic tegulae in bricks type of Roman roof that you always get.
Okay. Right. Well, I mean, we've got more comments than questions at the moment. As I say, the hive mind is going full throttle on a Friday night. Obviously, been nice and relaxed now. So these, I'm going to record all the comments and pass them on to you, because there's some really interesting and useful stuff here as well. Help with your research. We do have another question. What do you think the significance of the bath is?
The bathhouse.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, apart from the obvious.
So every villa had at least one bath. Often many. I mean, often there was, even the workers had their own bathing suite, and they could be quite simple. They could be very elaborate. So in this one, like here, I think in this one, they're thinking that this kind of apsidal end, this is where the hot plunge bath would have been. So they'd be very close to the furnace. And then these would be the hot rooms. So you see these hypercores. So this would be a hot room close to the furnace. If I go back to the main plan, you can see here. So these are the bar. So these would be bars for the like the main villa, but there's probably another bath which would have been servicing for these buildings here. So there'd be a whole set, and they'd probably be divided between men and women, workers, different statuses would have their own bathing suites and stuff. So they're very common in villas. So every villa has one.
Okay. Another question: could number 1 be Frinsbury?
Well, I'm actually working at Frinsbury at the moment. So I think it's just off the page. Where is it? Oh, I'm right at the bottom. So I think Frinsbury should be just off screen, more on the Isle of Grain. So if you like, I can. If you buy this, the table's in it. You can. The mystery will be revealed. So
this is the teaser trailer.
There you go. It all ties into the hard sell. So.
Of course, we can look at the PAS record for the details. So the portable antiquity scheme for the details of the hoard, it should be on there as well.
Right.
And I'm just going through. Apparently, we said Bronze Age, bronze alloy coins meant copper alloy coins, of course. There was a question someone's just pointed out. I asked a question about the Google Maps, but I think we answered that, didn't we?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the building is.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any evidence of mosaics such as at Lanningston?
There's some very poor ones. There's nothing. I mean, unfortunately, there probably were. Almost certainly there was. I've got a picture of one. There almost certainly was mosaics, but if we go back, you see, I mean, this has just been destroyed. So these almost certainly would have had mosaics. So, but see, here we are. Here's a mosaic there, and you can see the different colours. So this was dug in the 1960s.
Okay.
But on my excavations to the west, all the floor levels had gone. So, but they were almost certainly had tessellated floors, mosaics, etc., etc.
Yeah, the hallmarks of a kind of high status building.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the other thing about Snodland, it's huge. It's the same area and the same number of rooms as Eccles. So while the appointment was clearly there's no evidence it was anything like Eccles. In terms of size, it was massive. It was a huge, 150 meters across. So it's a big estate.
Yeah. Any evidence of any industrial activity there? That's another question that's come through.
I think it's some minor evidence of kind of smithing bottoms and things, but the area we seem to be in was more kind of agricultural crop processing, which tends to be the main thing. But they almost certainly did do their own kind of iron smithing, but that would have been somewhere else in this kind of wider periphery. So no, nothing really specific to that.
Okay, I've got clarification of the bath question as well. The questioner was referring to the square bath.
Oh yes, that was I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah. There's some. This is it here. So in the 1960s, they weren't sure what this was, and there's still, I don't really know what it functioned as now. So it seems to be in line, so it would have held water. So it was either the bath itself, potentially the plunge bath, or it was the cistern. It basically held the water, and then the water was piped elsewhere. We know that these definitely had piping because we found the channeled pipes which housed the lead piping. So. The trouble is it's in isolation, so joining the dots is difficult. We don't know how it fits. If I go back up, it's here. So we don't know how it fits with the rest because of the truncation. So difficult to interpret. And also, look, it's only a few courses high. So again, difficult to know exactly what it was for.
Mm. You talked about the difficulty with excavating a concentric building, obviously, because when it collapsed, you've got to identify that it's collapsed at different levels. I mean, I could see why there's complications on that. And how did you date the roof when you think about talking about standard imbrices and tegulae construction?
So we're fortunate in there's been a lot of work on ceramic building materials carried out in London, I think by Ian Betts, and Eccles. So these fabrics are known. So when they're using these types of clays and the forms do change. And if we go back, so these type of the kind of marks they're putting on them, not so much these are keying, but sometimes you get roller stamping, and that's very dateable. But generally it's the fabric, the type of clays they're using are dateable. It's a very well studied area, so we know from the fabric and the form that these are Neronian, and then the later ones are, they're different from the later Flavian ones and the later 2nd century ones.
Right. Okay, so there's a typology and there's a
exactly that's the word. There is a typology for these things. Yeah. I know
Ernest Black did an awful lot of research on their box fluid tiles as well. He's very good at them. Yeah, very excited by a bunch of box fluid tiles that we found at the Bourne Park Roman Villa.
Right. Yeah, they're one of those. There's one of those prosaic finds which. Doesn't fire the imagination immediately, but they can tell you so much about the site and its uses. Yeah, unglamorous but vital.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you explain more about the relationship with the rivers? This is a good question, actually, because did you find any evidence of a quay or a landing stage or anything else that might indicate that there was commerce going on there?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very good question, because I think the river is vital to Snodland. I think it's one of the main reasons why it was put there, and it's very close. You can see it is that. I mean, currently, well, that's 25 meters. Who knows where the river was in the Roman period? It would have been somewhere in the vicinity, but we don't know exactly. And the trouble is with rivers is when they move, they can erode, and also they can deposit. So if there was a quay, then it may have gone, or it may be buried under meters of alluvium. The potential still exists, but I'm sure Snodland had a very close and intimate connection with the river, and its inhabitants used it almost daily. So.
Okay, so did you find any Eccles flagons at Snodland? I haven't asked you that yet, have I?
No, Eccles flagons. I don't know, actually. I'll have to wade through the pot report. We found a lot of pot. I think we were getting on for, we were talking about in the pot, there was almost half a ton of pottery. So I'm not sure exactly on where it was from. So
okay, all right, but that's all available in your book, which is free.
Yeah,
good shots to buy.
Yes. That's another reason to buy it.
Okay. This is from Linda, and she's wondering, in the Name the Dots quiz, which you should definitely copyright. She's wondering whether 1 is up north and 2 is St Mary's Island. What do you think?
God. Are we back to the numbers?
Yeah.
Up north, yes, up north could be. Yeah, actually, I'm gonna have to look this up. It's bugging me now. I won't do it now. I've got to log into my work server, but I will do it, and I will post the answers to the quiz, to the numbers quiz.
Brilliant. I'll stick something on Facebook. I'll update the Facebook page with your erstwhile answers. And also, it's going to be on YouTube as well. So any comments, if anyone thinks of anything afterwards and they've forgotten to ask today or mention today, post it on the comments on the YouTube, and I'll make sure that Giles gets to know what you're thinking. And did you establish a fresh water supply?
It would be the Medway.
Yeah. Okay. Obviously, it wouldn't be the kind of condition it is now. Now, you didn't mention you mentioned that there might have been used as a granary, I believe, before. There's some great evidence from these back to concentric build. This one,
yeah, Alton Kirkby. Yes, I mean this is. I mean the central bit is akin to a military granary. So yeah, I mean very good evidence for use of as a granary.
At Snodland.
Oh, it's not. We had tantalising evidence of crop processing kind of detritus, which had been fortuitously burnt and preserved. So they seem to have been doing things like threshing and dehusking in the vicinity of it. So they were clearly doing something with the kind of the produce they were getting from the fields, but it was in very small amounts because these things burnt by accident. So there's never going to be a lot of them. So it just hinted that these buildings might have been connected to crop storage, crop processing. Right. So as you would expect, really, from what in essence is a massive farm.
Yeah. I mean, people tend to forget that the Romans essentially were farmers, even the soldiers were just farmers. Yeah. Their aim was to do their 25 years, get back to their farms, get a piece of land and finish it.
Yeah, for all of Avila's opulence, it was essentially at the day a massive farm. I mean, that was what they were there for.
Okay, and the bathroom we discovered, Panos was asking whether you just found a hot bath. So you found a caldera, and did you find any of the other the cool bath and the tepid area?
No, I mean, again, these are the so I was digging further west on the periphery. So
the slot right in the middle, wasn't there?
Yeah, if we go back to this, so the baths, the only known baths we know about are here in the middle. What we did, we found but what we're getting like the destroyed remains of bathhouses. So we did actually find curved mouldings from baths, so the broken up bits of them. So no, but they almost certainly were there. But imagine this, where it says baths, this area all around here had been destroyed. So it was just fortuitous that this one survived. If I go back to the photo, see. That's it there, that's the tank there. So all this area here where there almost certainly were coal baths, rooms, etc. had been destroyed by the 1960s.
Okay. there's another comment here actually. It's about Frinsbury. Is Frinsbury quarried out late 19th century? Is the Fort Amherst Villa?
So I don't really understand the context. What we
okay, no, I'll skip over that. Perhaps Chris can send the question in a slightly different way. It must be getting late on a Friday. Here's another question. Would you elaborate in the late Roman period at Snodland being its golden age? Most villas in Kent, this is from Elizabeth, most villas in Kent seem to have been occupied into the 4th century, though often after periods of abandonment and often with buildings being repurposed for more utilitarian uses. Okay,
like a squatter type occupation.
Later in the period.
Yeah. So I think this is, I mean, I'm kind of quoting Ernest Black's work here. So it seems to be that the most of the villas there's a change of function. They're going out of use. There's probably still people there, almost certainly there's still people there, but they seem to have been declining in use, declining in the amount of consumption. This doesn't seem to be the case at Snodland in the Medway, when there's much more investment in buildings. So they're building bigger buildings, like building 2 is bigger than building 1. So they clearly putting money into them and stuff. So saying, obviously there's local differences, and I'm sure there are other kind of places in Kent which are also, prosperous during this period as well. But just generally, so Ernest looked at the kind of a lot of the sites, and he just said that most of them are in decline during the 4th century.
Right. Yeah, but this one seems to have sort of kept its allure, or kept its status to a degree. Okay, there's been some more work actually by Anne Sassin and the Darren Valley Landscape Partnership into the granary at Lullingstone, which was recently redug. So it's been suggested as maybe as a store for a number of the villas in that area. Do you think that perhaps the concentric building at Snodland was a granary supporting all the villas in that area?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure it was a granary. If we go back to the granary, so for a kind of the formal granary, so corn weighs a lot, so you have to have a very strong floor, and that's why you have all these sleeper walls here. So we didn't find that. So whether if they may not have been storing in it like they were at Horton Kirkby, but they may have been processing, like doing the various activities. Excuse me. So again, I mean, we had a very small assemblage of child macrobotanicals, but they were potentially informative. It's very difficult to say either way exactly what it was from such. I mean, they were just chance discoveries of charred grains, so difficult.
Right. Okay, I've got clarification from Chris. Number 1 is the quarried out Frinsbury Villa, whilst number 2 is the villa found under the lines above Chatham Fort, Amherst.
There we go. There we go.
Thanks, Chris, for clearing that one up. Okay, well, there are lots of other comments. People have been really engaged and motivated by your talk, Giles. It's really so very kind of you to come along and talk for us tonight. As I say, this can continue on YouTube. I'll also post a link to this this event when it's loaded up on YouTube on our Facebook page. So anybody who wants to go on Facebook and make any comments or whatever, perhaps Giles, if you wouldn't mind keeping an eye on that.
Sure.
And perhaps sort of addressing some of those questions that are coming and as they do. So okay, well, again, I'm just going to say thanks very much for taking part tonight, and I really appreciate it. We've really enjoyed it. You've been a fabulous guest presenter. Thank you so much for coming along. we thanks everyone for joining us as well, and for your comments. Absolutely fantastic. I've got like 70 comments, and my mind is doing somersaults. I'm trying to deal with that as well. So thank you ever so much. It's really not wasted, and Giles, we get to see every comment that's been made. If you've enjoyed this talk, obviously, please go and make a comment on YouTube, thumbs up or something to just acknowledge that you've seen it and you've liked it. I wish Giles all the best in his career and with his book, obviously, which will be available from all good bookshops and some bad ones too. So the next event will be another trustee talk, and that's with Vice President Rod Laguerre. And he'll be talking about the Kent Underground Research Group, and that's Kent's hidden archaeology, which is really quite intriguing. So I'll be there to learn lots of new stuff about that. And that will be on Tuesday, the 13th of April at 7:30. As usual, if you go onto our website and go to news and events, you can see the events calendar. You can see a full list of all the things we've got going on. If there are any events that you want to suggest, anybody out there who wants to come and do a talk and share their information and their research with our audience, then please feel free to do so. Again, if you're not a member, please consider joining the Society. We'd love to have you on board, and it would be fantastic if you could support the work that we're trying to do. Okay, thanks again to Giles.
Thank you, Fred. I enjoyed it.
Thanks to everyone for taking part, and we'll see you next time.
Take care. Bye.